Oh,
That's a
no.
good question.
Ellen, you've got the wrong camera on. You've got the back camera on. You gotta hit the button and go to the front camera.
Hit the button, go to the front camera.
I'm not sure which computer you're using, but it's probably a couple of arrows chasing each other.
It says switch, yeah, it says
So-
switch camera.
That you had it for a second and then you went away. There you go.
I don't know, I'm pushing the switch camera and it's
Yeah,
not doing,
it switches and then it switches back. There you go.
did I switch?
You switched. You're in the right one now.
Okay, because I think because Mordecai has his screen on, it's a little messed up.
Hey.
Oh,
Well,
everyone's
no.
There
here.
you go. That's why. Okay, everyone, can you hear me?
Yes,
I can't hear you.
Okay,
Yes.
let's go.
Where are we going?
Welcome to lesson 4.
Oh,
Secrets
there I
of the
am.
Bible, the mystical meanings and of the stories in the Torah and the lessons for life. So as we did in the previous lessons, we're going to take stories that you're all familiar with, and we're going to examine them and uncover the layers, and then take a lesson that we can apply in our daily life. And again, I want to invite everyone to join in with questions and interruptions, as the class is only made healthier if you guys participate. Okay, so we spoke about the story of the tree. We spoke about the Noah's Ark. We spoke about Yaakov and Esav. And tonight we're going to speak about Yosef and his brothers, which is very appropriate because in this week's Torah portion, which you're going to read, the Shabbos, the brothers, Yaakov marries Rachel and Leah, Bilhah and Zilpah, and has 11 of the 12 tribes are born in this week's parsha. So we're actually going to touch upon last week's parsha. This week's parsha, we're actually going to cover the story of Joseph and his brothers, but we're all going to tie it in. I think tonight is a wonderful class. Let's begin with the text 1a. As always, we have a video. You can join along. We're going to speak about first the sale of Joseph and what led to that story. I'm going to put myself on mute so the audio doesn't.
Marty, we're not getting audio from the PC.
Okay, I'm going to restart. Thank you when I share the screen. Okay, hold on. I'm going to share again. Thank you for Hold on.
The audio has to be enabled on the PC.
I know. I forgot to click this. Okay, so let us go back.
Perfecto.
Joseph was 17 years old, shepherding with his brothers in the flocks. And Joseph brought bad word of them to their father. Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons, as he was a child of old age to him, and he made him a striped coat. His brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, and they hated him. And they were not able to speak peaceably with him. Joseph dreamed a dream and told his brothers, "Here we were bundling sheaves in the middle of the field, and here my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And here your sheaves surrounded, and they bowed to my sheaf. His brothers said to him, "Shall you then reign over us? Or will you rule over us?" And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. He again dreamed another dream and related it to his brothers, and he said, "Here, I have dreamed another dream, and behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing to me." His brothers envied him, but his father guarded the matter.
Things come to a head when, one day, Jacob sends Joseph to check on his brothers, who are out shepherding the flocks in the countryside.
They saw him from afar, and when he had yet to come near to them, they schemed against him to put him to death. And they said to one another, "Here comes the dreamer. Now let us go and kill him and throw him into one of the pits, and we will say, 'An evil beast has devoured him,' and we shall see what will become of his dreams."
Reuben, the eldest of the brothers, dissuades the others from committing outright murder, suggesting that, instead, they throw him into one of the pits out there in the wilderness.
When Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped Joseph of his coat, the striped coat that was on him, and they took him and threw him into the pit. They sat down to eat bread, and they lifted their eyes, and they saw, behold, a caravan of Ishmaelites was coming from Gilead. And Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is there if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, but our hand shall not be upon him, as he is our brother, our flesh." His brothers listened, and they sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph to Egypt. They took Joseph's coat, and they slaughtered a hairy goat, and they dipped the coat in the blood. They sent the striped coat to their father, and they said, "We found this. Please recognize. Is it your son's coat or not?" He recognized it and said, "My son's coat. An evil beast has devoured him. Torn. Joseph is torn." And he mourned his son many days.
Okay, so anyone have any problems with this story? Any questions? No, everyone's okay with brothers selling their the younger brother. I mean, as the youngest in the family, I've always had, this story has always affected me the most. Of course, my brothers or sisters always joking I'm the favorite, and I'm always afraid my brothers are going to sell me to slavery. But I guess we don't have anyone else that's youngest.
Wow. No, I'm the youngest also. My sister, I have an older sister, but we're 5.5 years apart, so I never really got into that that type of thing. Although when I was younger, she'd always yell, for my mom, "Ira's bothering me." But
Right.
I have a question. Where did all these pits come from that they were going to throw him into? And what wild beasts were there at that time that could have devoured him?
What are wild pits? I mean, they had wells, they had pits. This is the desert. I mean, there's holes in the ground. You have to realize the land of Israel is not
So
settled.
everybody just goes out discriminately digging for water?
In a time of where everything was agriculture and shepherds and flock, you had to dig for water, especially in the land of Israel. You need to gather the rainwater.
Okay. What about the beasts?
I don't know. What about the beasts?
Well, what beast would have devoured him at that time?
I don't know. You never read the tale of, what is it? My kids read the continuation of Harry Potter, the Fantastic Beasts, or Where to Find Them.
That's a nice story, and it's fiction. We're talking here,
Why? I don't know.
Oh, it's not fiction.
I don't know. In the absence of civilization, of mass civilization, you don't think it's fair to say that there was, I don't know, wolves or I don't know, bear? I mean, I don't know what wild beast would be around in that native to that area, but I'm sure there's wild beasts.
Okay,
I don't know, maybe, you know, I mean,
those are my questions.
Maybe lions. I don't know. I know lions live in Southern Africa. I don't know. Yeah.
You got
That's a good
wolf,
question.
a bear, you got hyena, you even have some apes, I believe, that roam the area, like Sasquatch.
Right. That's right. Okay.
So,
All right. So
Raphael,
now,
Rabbi,
yeah.
yeah. So it seems like we have two generations utilizing deceit.
Oh yeah. We're gonna get into that. Oh yes. Stick around.
And,
We got a lot
and,
of deceit going on.
and it's a painful deceit. So along with that question I have is anyone getting remorseful about this? Is anyone having second thoughts?
Yeah. We're gonna get good stuff. Good stuff, Adriel. We're gonna touch on it. So stay tuned in the middle. Okay. So
Yeah.
the first video was about Joseph and his brothers not getting along. Part B, reconciliation, is when Joseph and his brothers they make up. Okay, I'm gonna mute the video.
You know what? Also, one of the
The next segment we will read is from Genesis, chapter 45, and it occurs 22 years after the selling of Joseph. In the interim, this is what happened. Joseph was taken to Egypt and sold to Potiphar, a high-ranking officer in Pharaoh's court. Joseph was immensely successful in everything that he did, and he was put in charge of all his master's affairs. Potiphar's wife lusted after the beautiful and charismatic young slave, and she tried to seduce him. When Joseph rejected her advances, Potiphar's wife had him thrown into prison. After many years in prison, Joseph gained his freedom when he successfully interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, which predicted 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. Pharaoh appointed Joseph viceroy of Egypt, and Joseph's successful planning saved the entire region from starvation. The famine also engulfed the land of Israel, and Joseph's brothers came to Egypt to purchase grain. Joseph recognized them, but they did not recognize him. Joseph accused his brothers of being spies. Taking one of the brothers as a hostage, he forced them to bring their youngest brother, Benjamin, to Egypt. At first, Jacob refused to send Benjamin to Egypt, but the famine was in full force, and soon their food ran out. Finally, Judah persuaded Jacob by vowing to assume personal responsibility for Benjamin's safety. When the brothers came to Egypt for the second time, Joseph framed Benjamin by planting his silver goblet in Benjamin's sack. He arrested the brothers and declared that Benjamin will remain in Egypt as his slave. Judah approaches Joseph to plead for Benjamin's release, offering himself as a slave in Benjamin's place. This is what happens next.
Joseph was no longer able to constrain himself, and he called, "Remove every man from my presence." And no man stood with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. He put his voice to weeping, and Egypt heard, and the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" His brothers could not answer him, as they were bewildered before him. And Joseph said to his brothers, "And now do not be distressed, and it should not upset you that you sold me here. For as a source of livelihood, God has sent me before you. It is not you who sent me here, but God. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, 'So said your son Joseph, God has placed me master to all of Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay.'"
And that is how Jacob and his 12 sons, who would become the 12 tribes of Israel, ended up in Egypt.
Okay. Any questions on the story?
Yeah. Remove those images from the right side of your screen. They are causing
No,
my
no,
screen.
because in the video, it records better. You can see people are participating in the class. Request denied. Next.
Looks like crap on my end.
All right. But in the recorded one, it looks better. All right, next. Any questions on the story? No questions on the story. You guys are okay? Okay,
right,
okay.
He totally forgives his brothers. And this is how many years later? He was 27. He was
22 years later.
Okay, so
He was
this is
17 when he was sold, 39 when he revealed himself to his brothers.
okay.
You had a question before this, Ellen?
Just it just seemed that there was the two brothers who really didn't want to kill him, who really wanted another way out of the situation, even though I guess they too were jealous of him. One said, "Let's put him in a pit," and the other one said, "Oh wait, let's sell him."
Yehuda. Yes. Yes.
With Reuben and who else?
Reuven said, "Let's put him in the pit." The Torah actually testifies that in order to save him, and Yehuda is the one that says, "Let's not kill him. Let's sell him." And we'll get back to Yehuda's logic, because if you want to save him, don't sell him into slavery. You know, if the brothers were willing to commentate, I know we're getting off the subject here a little bit, but the commentators ask, if the brothers listened to Yehuda as not to kill him, why didn't Yehuda just suggest that to send him home? So one of the commentators say is because the brothers wouldn't have listened to such a thing, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. Okay, but usually when people look at this story, there's two big questions that stick out to everybody. Number one is the brothers' actions. How could it be the brothers do such a thing? The brothers go and they sell their own brother, and then they go lie to their father. They go lie to their father Jacob. The other side is, how could it be that Joseph, to get revenge, and he tortures his brothers and accuses them of being a spy, and then he makes them bring down Binyamin, and he causes his father grief. It seems as one bad act brings upon another bad act. So you might say, all right, this is the way people act. And in fact, the book of Genesis is a book of sibling rivalry, of people acting poorly to their brothers. We have Cain killing Hevel. We have Ishmael trying to kill Yitzchak at one point. We read about the story of Yaakov and Esav last week. So this is just a continuation in the story of bad behavior between brothers. However, if you look at text number 3, the Shalom, Rabbi Shaya Horowitz, who was one of the greatest Kabbalists of all time, he says we're not talking about the children of Yaakov in such a vein. Look at text number 3. Before explaining how the story of the selling of Joseph and all happened at the basis of King David and Mashiach, we must address the great difficulties with these stories. First of all, a general difficulty, the greatness of the sons of Jacob, the ones who would go on to establish the 12 tribes of Israel, right? We all know you come from Reuven, Shimon, Levi. We have them. We all name our children after the 12 tribes. And it says in according to Kabbalah, they were higher than the angels. They had all the 12 configuration of the Tetragrammaton. How could the mind grasp the idea that these exalted individuals were joined together to commit the most severe sin? They were thinking of murdering him, which is the capital offense, and instead they resorted to selling him, which is also a capital offense. Doesn't make any sense. And then another part of it is okay, that Joseph got revenge. So you can say, what do you mean? That's understood. After the way Yosef's brothers act toward him, we understand very well that that Yosef wanted to get revenge, and it seems that's the way it goes. And then he goes and he frames Binyamin, and he says Binyamin is going to stay as my slave. The problem with that theory is, after when Yosef reveals himself, we don't see Yosef as a person holding a grudge. We don't see him bearing any anger, any resentment towards his brothers. If you look back to text number 2 on page 106 in your book, he says, "It is not you who sent me here, but God." And he says no animosity to his brothers whatsoever. So we see after Yosef reveals his identity, we can judge from the way he treats his brothers that the whole episode where he accuses them of being slaves and all that is not a result of him trying to take revenge. So we need to dive in to the deeper layer in the story. As we said in previous classes,
being slaves, he's accused of being spies.
I'm sorry?
No, I thought he accused them of being spies,
He
not
did.
slaves.
I'm sorry. No, he didn't accuse them of being slaves. He accused them of being spies, and at the end, he wants to take Binyamin as a slave. I'm sorry if I confused those two terms.
I think Joseph just wanted to make him sweat a little bit.
Well, again, that's what it seems like. But if that was the case, we see that Yosef bears no ill will towards his brothers. So then, it's the brothers who are shocked, and it's Yosef the one that's comforting them. And if you wanted to make them sweat or take revenge, then a person wouldn't act that way. So we have to find out what's really going on. What's the layer that's under? What's the soul of the story? Because as I said many times, every biblical story has what we see in the text, but then it has a deeper layer. Okay. How could it happen? The Gemara asks this question: how could it happen that you have a brothers selling each other, selling a sibling, and they hate their brother, they're jealous of their brother? So the Gemara says that actually doesn't start with the brothers. The buck actually goes back to Yaakov. As you see that Yaakov showed a favoritism and had preferential treatment towards his son Yosef. And that's why the Gemara says in text number 4, a person should never discriminate between his children. Because look what happened because of a small amount of weight of fine wool. Because Yaakov gives Yosef a coat of fine wool, that brought animosity and hatred and jealousy. And because of that, our forefathers ended up in Egypt. The old Jewish joke where it's the first Jewish president is elected, and the guy calls up his Yiddish mama and says, "Mama," says, a couple days is inauguration, says, "I want you to come." So what day? It's going to be Tuesday. No, Tuesday I play mahjong with my friends. Says, "Ma, I'm coming to president. Come on." He says, "No, I can't. I don't want to get on the bus. It's cold. Bus, Ma, on the president. I'll arrange for you limousine." He says, "All right, if it means so much for you to me to be there, I'll come." So she's sitting there. She's sitting next to the chief of staff, and while her son, the president, is being sworn in, Mrs. Goldstein elbows the chief of staff, and it says, "You see that handsome young man with his hand up? His brother's a doctor." So we know it's very, very bad. It's very, very bad to play favorites. And Yaakov is not the only one, I guess you could say, to blame. Yosef also brings it upon himself, because he's the one, as you remember, he's bringing bad reports back to his father, and he's saying the dreams, which wasn't the smartest thing to do. In fact, the Shalah, who we quoted just in text number 3, he says that we know, we read it in Yom Kippur prayers, that the 10 martyrs, the Romans killed the great rabbis, was to atone for the sale of Joseph by the 10 brothers. Because nothing ever happened to them. So the Shaul asks a question, but like Ellen pointed out, says before, not all the 10 brothers were involved. There were 12 brothers, right? Binyamin was home, right? So that's not 11. Yosef is the one being sold.
Yeah.
And obviously you can't blame him. Reuven wanted to bring him home. So that means there are only 9 brothers involved in the sale. Why were the 10 martyrs? So the Shalom points out that Rabbi Akiva was a reincarnation of Yosef's soul, and he was a martyr because it happened because of Joseph as well. So we have over here Yaakov and Yosef provoking. So you want to say the brothers were provoked to jealousy and animosity, fine, you can understand the brothers didn't love Joseph so much. But to go so far to want to kill him and then sell him into slavery, I think we can all agree that's a little bit of an overreaction. So let's dive a little bit deeper.
Not only that, he was a kid.
17 years old, yeah.
He was a kid. So
exactly, he was a kid, yeah. You know, I was talking to Michael J today. We were learning, you know, that my son's teacher got angry. My son said something, right? So I was saying sometimes as an adult, you have to look the other way. You know, you don't have to take everything a kid says seriously. You know, even if he says foolish things, he says, okay, you know, as a nar, he's a fool. So let's go deeper into the story. Another layer over here, the Seforno, who wrote a commentary, Rabbi Avadia Seforno, Avadia Seforno was a Spanish scholar, and he left with his brethren from Spain, and as you see is in the biography in your books, 1475, and then he settled in the town of Seforno in Italy, and he was a treasurer for the Spanish king, and actually he wanted him to stay, and he didn't stay. Very interesting story. Anyway, so he writes, the brothers did it because it was a matter of self-defense. Let's look at text number 5, page 109 in your book. They saw Joseph as the one who was plotting to destroy them physically and spiritually. And Torah says, if someone's coming to kill you, you kill them first. What does that mean? How do we explain it? Look at text number 6. Cadence Yitzchak says like this. He says, if you look at the book of Bereshis, we have one brother being accepted and one brother being rejected. Hevel was the accepted brother, and Cain was rejected. Didn't want to reject him, so he killed him. Then we have Yitzchak and Ishmael. Avram chooses Yitzchak, and Avram sends away Ishmael and his other children, meaning sending away, meaning listen here, very nice. I'll give you a piece of real estate, but you're not the main child. Then last week we read about Yitzchak and Ishmael. Yaakov and Esau. And so we have Ishmael being rejected, and Esau being rejected. Yitzchak giving Yaakov the blessings. So the brothers thought that what's happening here? Yaakov is going to choose one child, and Yosef is setting himself up to be that one child. So as you see here, we have Avram. Avram had a choice between Yitzchak and Ishmael, and he chooses Yitzchak. Yitzchak has a choice between Esau and Yaakov, and he chooses Yaakov. So now the brothers are thinking the same. It's repeating itself. Yaakov is having the choice between Yaakov, the 11 brothers, and Yosef, and who is Yaakov going to choose? Yaakov's going to choose Yosef. And they thought that can't be because there's two types of death. There's the spirit, there's physical death, where a person takes away our bodies, and then the spiritual death. And we all know that spiritual death is a lot worse than physical death, because the worst that can happen is a person to forget their Judaism. I remember there was once a story happened in Russia. A young man traveled. He was ill. It wasn't healthy person. He traveled to learn, and he got sick and he passed away. So someone went over to the rabbi. One of the rabbis came to the funeral and said, and he said, it's a tragedy what happened. So the rabbi said, yes, it's a tragedy what happened. But remember, he said, I'll say it in Yiddish and I'll translate it in English. He said, it's the best that she starben via Yid, so leben via goy. Meaning it's better to die as a Jew than to live like a Gentile. Meaning that what was happening here isn't just, how much of the bank account we're talking about, spiritual inheritance. This is major stuff. And we read before that Jacob's sons weren't Esau, they weren't Ishmael. They understood that they were rightful heirs to Jacob's legacy. So now we understand that they felt that they were allowed to go about and get rid of Yosef because their own physical and spiritual lives was at risk. Does that make sense?
They were also from different mothers, right? They weren't just
6 brothers were from Leah, 2 from Bilhah, 2 from Zilpah, and 2 from Rachel.
Which were Joseph and Benjamin, right?
Joseph and Benjamin were from Rachel, yes. Dan and Naphtali were from Zilpah. Bilhah, Gad and Asher were from Zilpah. So, does the theory of self-defense make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Again, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to chime in. There's another answer given. This answer is given by the Shalah. And he says it's a question of sovereignty, rulership. Now we know that Yehuda, the tribe of Yehuda, represents kingdom. But that's not the only child. That's not the only one of Yaakov's children that has the element of rulership. Look at text number 7. The crown of sovereignty was granted to Yehuda. However, were it not to be preceded by the kingdom of Yosef in Egypt, the kingdom of Yehuda would never have materialized. And the people of Israel have not become a nation, God forbid, for Yosef, and this is key because we're going to touch on this later, Yosef is the channel. Yosef's brothers failed to understand this. Rather, they thought that Yosef was a competition and looking and seeking to the sovereignty to become the king permanently and exclusively for himself and his descendants. They therefore judged him by the law of Torah, and their law is that whoever is accused of a crime of high treason, in Hebrew it's called Mered b'malchut. Mered b'malchut is someone who is accused of treason, going against the king is punishable by death. For one who contests the sovereignty of the house of David, as the word contested in the divine presence, and and the punishment is death. So they understood that Yehuda is the king, and they foresaw that the Yehuda would be the king, and we know that Mashiach it comes from Yehuda, and later on when Yaakov at the end of his life is giving a blessing to all his children, he said Yehuda is the king, and all the brothers will acknowledge Ad Kiyave Shiloh, and Shiloh is referring to Mashiach. And here comes Yosef, and if you go back to the text before, Yosef has dreams that the brothers are going to bow to him, and the brothers are thinking, here's coming this guy, and he's trying to overturn the very order that God has predetermined. Yehuda is the king, not Yosef. And if someone goes against the king, he's deserving of punishment. So the brothers are thinking that the Jewish sovereignty belongs in the tribe of Yehuda, and Yosef's dreams. And again, it's not just one; it's 2. And he doesn't keep it to himself. He comes out and says, "Listen here, guys, I'm the king." And they say, we have to get rid of this guy. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So we see that the brothers were not just acting out of anger or jealousy. They had a reason that was based in Torah. It was a calculated reason.
I'll leave out the crackers.
I'm sorry?
I was just saying that
Sounds
the
like
idea
boring.
of being the king made more sense to me than self-defense.
Okay. Okay. All right, listen, it says there's 70 faces to the Torah. Different elements are going to agree with you than others. That's okay. All right, guys, let's go. Let's go a step deeper. The MS is, the truth is, the conflict didn't begin with the brothers. It rather began with their mothers, with Jacob's wives. And the truth is, the conflicts didn't really begin with Jacob's wives and mothers. It really began with Yaakov and his brother Esau. And the truth is that the conflict doesn't begin with Yaakov and Esau. It really goes back to creation of man himself. And the conflict of Yaakov and Esau and the brothers and everything else is inside me and it's inside you. Let's go. Let's dive deeper and see how everything interconnects. You're going to love it. As we discussed it, as Ellen pointed out, the brothers were from different mothers. And the story, the formation of the Jewish people, the formation of Yaakov's family is a very, very wacky story. There's no other way. You read the story and you're like, this doesn't make sense. My wife, Cyril, always says, the couple she loves the most in the Torah is Yitzchak and Rivka. One husband, one wife, two kids, normal, one minivan. That's normal. You go to Yaakov's family, it's a really, really, really crazy story. If you remember at the end of last week's Parsha, after Yaakov deceives Yitzchak, Yitzchak and Rivka tell him to go to Haran and take a wife from Haran, because Yaakov is not allowed to marry someone from the children of Canaan. Can't marry one of the natives. He has to go to Haran to marry one of Lavan's family. Let's look at text number 8, which is going to be in the video, to see the story.
Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. The eyes of Leah were tender, and Rachel was of beautiful form and beautiful appearance. Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, "I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter." Laban said, "Better I give her to you than I give her to another man. Stay with me." Jacob worked for Rachel 7 years, and they were in his eyes as a few days in his love for her. And Jacob said to Laban, "Bring here my wife, as my days are fulfilled, and I will come to her." Laban gathered all the people of the place and made a feast. It was in the evening, and he took his daughter Leah and brought her in to him, and he came to her. It was in the morning, and behold, she is Leah. And he said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? Have I not served with you for Rachel? Why have you deceived me?" And Laban said, "It is not so done in our place to give the younger before the firstborn."
Laban, however, agrees to allow Jacob to marry Rachel as well, in exchange for another 7 years of labor.
He came also to Rachel, and he also loved Rachel more than Leah, and he worked with him yet another 7 years.
And that is how Jacob ended up marrying both Leah and Rachel. Leah proceeded to have 4 children, one right after the other: Reuben, Simon, Levi, and Judah, while Rachel remained childless. Determined to participate in the creation of the people of Israel, Rachel asked Jacob to marry her maidservant Bilhah and have children with her. That union produced Dan and Naphtali. Not to be outdone, Leah had Jacob marry her maidservant, Zilpah, which produced 2 more children, Gad and Asher. Then Leah had another 3 children of her own, 2 sons and a daughter, Issachar, Zebulun, and Dinah. Finally, Rachel's prayers were answered, and she conceived a child. Joseph was born. 8 years later, Rachel had a second son, but she tragically died in childbirth. The boy was named Benjamin.
Okay. So now, going back to what we said before, we can now understand. We said that Yaakov showed preferential treatment. He showed favoritism towards Yosef. We can understand why. Yaakov, in the whole time, wanted to marry Rachel. Yaakov's plan was to marry Rachel, have 12 kids with her, and live happily ever after. Yeah, Rachel's like, 12 kids? I don't think so. No, that's not what happened. So Yaakov wanted to marry Rachel the whole time. Rachel, throughout the Torah, is called Yaakov's wife. No one else is called Yaakov's wife. Yaakov wanted to marry Rachel. In fact, it's only after Rachel has Yosef that Yaakov decides it's time to go back to the land of Canaan. So we see over here that because Yaakov loved Rachel, so even though the other children came before, Yosef was the one who was his firstborn, and Yaakov wanted Yosef to be the king. If you go back to text 1a, lines 28 and 29, it says, the Aviv Shamaras Hadavar, and the father watched the matter. What it means is watch the matter means he watched the matter. He wanted it to come true, because Yaakov wanted Yosef to be the firstborn, wanted Yosef to be the leader, because Yosef was a product of his union between him and Rachel. That's why when Yosef predicted he'd become leader, Yaakov is excited about it. And now we can understand when the brothers come back and say that the leader of Egypt wants us to send down Benjamin, send out Benjamin. Yaakov says, oh, no way. I already lost one child, and he says, from my wife. That means to the children of Leah. Remember, who went down to Egypt? The children of Leah, the children of Bilhah, the children of Zilpah. Those 10 brothers. And he's telling them to their face, I already lost one child from my wife, and now you want me to lose another one? So we can understand very well, so why Yaakov is so protective over Binyamin, and we can understand the animosity, the jealousy that the brothers have for. Whoops! What happened? Oh, hey, my finger's not. There you go. We can understand the jealousy that the brothers have, because it's straight out. It is blatant. So in reality, the rift, the divide that there is between Yosef and his brothers does not end when Yosef and his brothers make up. It's a reoccurring theme that happens throughout history, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that more. You got to admit, though, it's a very, very crazy story. Yaakov wants to marry Rachel, and Lavan brings Leah in. And if you go into the Medrash, it's even crazier because Yaakov suspected Lavan of wanting to cheat him. And what he does is that he has code words, but Rachel feels bad for Leah and gives her the code words. I mean, it's a wild story. And but we see here, and like Ariel pointed out earlier, that deception is a reoccurring theme in Yaakov's life. Yaakov deceives. This is the question for discussion. On page 114, what are the parallels between the incident of the stolen blessings and the bridal bait and switch that Lavan perpetrated against Jacob? I'll give you guys a chance to answer while I take a drink of water. Anybody? No? Let me see if I can. Does that make it better? No, that makes it worse. No one's gonna answer. All right. So I guess I have to do all the work myself around here. I'm telling you, unbelievable. Okay. So let's look at it. In both cases, there we go. So here we have in both cases that there's deception, there's manipulation that between siblings. Here we go. We're switching out siblings. On one hand, Yitzchak is deceived by Yaakov in order to get the firstborn rights. And then what happens? Lavan deceives Yaakov, and Lavan deceives Yaakov, and he switches Yaakov and Leah. Now Yaakov comes to Lavan Yaakov goes to Leah in the morning and says, "I don't understand. How do you do such a thing? Even if Rachel gave you the signs, how do you trick someone like that?" And look at text number 9. She says, "You're a liar, the daughter of a liar. You're a deceiver, the daughter of a deceiver." And Leah answers back. She doesn't take that from Yaakov. She says, "Really now? Who are you calling the deceiver here? Who do you think I learned it from? I learned it from the master." And when Yaakov complains to Lavan, "How do you deceive?" Lavan says, look at the words. He says, "It's not our custom in our place to give the younger before the firstborn." He doesn't say to give the younger before the older. He says the younger before the firstborn. And like text number 10, Rabbi Eliezer Ashkenazi says that Lavan was taunting Yaakov and saying, "In your place, the younger child is made into the firstborn. As you acted, of course, when you did was okay. But in our place, the firstborn rights won't be taken from the older sister and given to the younger." So, yes? I thought someone wanted to ask a question. But the deception doesn't end there. There's more. Why am I going to the next slide? What's going on here? Something's wrong with the... Yo. Oh, here you go. Number 2. The parallel. If you remember from last week, when Jacob walks into Isaac, and Isaac says, "You came back very quick." And he says, "Are you my son Esav?" And he says, "I am." It says, "Ani, I am." And Yaakov and Yaakov says to Leah, "When I was asking you, are you Rachel?" And she says, "I didn't say I'm Rachel. I said I am. I'm using the same trickery. We're playing the same game." And then later, if you go back to text or the text 1b, line 29, when Yaakov has to go into Yitzchak and fool his father, and he's worried that maybe Isaac will feel his skin and his smooth skin. So Rivka takes goat skin and puts it on him so he should feel hairy like Esav was. Ain't that interesting? Isn't it a coincidence that when the brothers try to sell Yaakov a story that Yosef was killed, they take his coat and they dip it in what blood? They dipped it in goat blood. Ain't it interesting? This is not a coincidence. So here we see all the deception. It's all intertwined. Look at what the Zohar says on page 116, text number 11. Jacob was correct in acting as he did. When Jacob went and got the firstborn rights, we discussed last week, he had to do it, and we're going to touch upon it again at the end of the class. Jacob had to do what he had to do. But just because you're doing the right thing, it doesn't mean you're going to escape unscathed. If you're helping somebody change a tire, you're doing a nice thing, you are going to get dirty. So that's what the Zohar is saying over here. Nevertheless, he was punished because he deceived his father with a hairy goat. He was punished with a hairy goat, and that's what we see. So we see a triple thread of deception. Jacob stealing the blessing, Lavan tricking Jacob into marrying Leah, and then the brothers selling Joseph. In fact, I want to look there. Who says this? The Vilna Gaon says, the Gaon from Vilna says something very interesting. He says, when Yaakov is hesitant to go and trick his father, and he tells his mother, says, I'm going to go in there for a blessing, but when my father sees that I'm lying to him, he will curse me. And he says, and then his mother says, Alai kolas chabni, upon myself is the curse. So the word in Hebrew, upon myself in Hebrew, is alai, which is spelled ayin, lamed, yud. So ayin stands for Esav, lamed stands for Lavan, and the yud stands for Yosef. The Vilna Gaon points out that these were the three trickeries in Yaakov's life. The Rivka was promising him that everything will be okay. Any questions so far? No, silence is admittance. Okay. So we see that Yaakov, yes, deceived his father for the blessings, and we spoke about that. And we're saying that there's a connection that because Yaakov stole the blessings, therefore it had to happen that Lavan, you had to be deceived with Lavan and Rachel and Leah. Why did it have to happen? So earlier we read in text 8, we read that Leah's eyes were soft because she was crying, and Rachel was beautiful. Why were Leah's eyes soft and red from crying? So look at text number 12. The Gemara explains. Page 117. The Gemara says like this. Leah heard people talking, saying, Rivka has 2 sons and Lavan has 2 daughters. The elder son will marry the elder, and the younger son will marry the younger. So she thought that she's destined to marry Esau. So she sat at the crossroads meeting. She asked people coming from Eretz Canaan, the land of Canaan, tell me, how does Rivka's oldest son behave? And they said, Esau, he's a rush, he's a wicked man, he's a highway robber. And she asked, and how does the younger son behave? Oh, Yaakov's a great guy. Yaakov dwells in tents. Yaakov's a wholesome person. So she wept until her lashes fell out because she didn't want to marry Esau. She wanted to marry she wanted to marry Yaakov. So we're not talking about over here, Leah was a yenta who stood at the street corners, wanting to know all the news in Anatevka. We're talking over here soulmates. And we'll see in the next reading, in text number 13, that this is the fundamental difference between Yaakov and Esau. This is the fundamental difference between Leah and Rachel, and this is the fundamental difference between Yosef and his brothers, and it all ties in. Let's go. Text number 13. The Rebbe explains. This is powerful stuff. I'm telling you, I enjoyed preparing for this class. The Rebbe explains as generally we can divide people into two categories. We have perfect people and imperfect people, righteous people and people who are striving to be righteous. In other words, tzaddikim and balei tshuva. Tzaddikim, righteous people, and balei tshuva, men of repentance. And he says the essential difference between the two groups within the 10 tribes, within the tribes of Israel, is the primary focus of the children of Leah. They are the children of Leah, their service is teshuvah, return. And the focus of Rachel's children, Yosef and Binyamin, is the service of tzaddikim, righteous. And they have their source in their mothers. Leah's connected with the service of the masters of return. And Rachel is connected with the service of the perfectly righteous. And the meaning, so the Rebbe says, the meaning when it says Rachel was beautiful, because a tzaddik is beautiful. A tzaddik does exactly what God wants, and his life is perfect. His life is beautiful, without blemish. Regarding Yaakov, it says Yaakov loved Rachel. Because what was Yaakov? Yaakov was a tzaddik. He sat in the tent, learned Torah, and his life was beautiful. So Yaakov thought, I'm a tzaddik. I'm going to marry Rachel, a tzaddik, and we'll have tzaddikim. It's a match made in heaven. So this is the deeper meaning of what the sages relate when the people were saying Rivka has 2 sons and Lavan has 2 daughters. The elder will marry the elder, meaning what was God's intent? That Leah, the older, the one who has the power of teshuvah, should marry Esau and harness Esau's energy. Remember, we spoke last week that what was Esau's problem? Esau had tremendous potential, no structure. Esau needed structure in his life. And so the plan was that Leah marries Esau and brings struggle, and brings structure. But Leah doesn't want. I'm going to tell you something. It's not in the text, but I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to give you a little appendix. In next week's parasha, we read that it says, "Vaytetzei Dina bas Leah," and Dina, the daughter of Leah, went out to speak, and she was out there, and she's kidnapped, and she's raped. And it's interesting that the Torah makes a point to call it Dina bas Leah. It says, why did it happen? Why did this happen to Yaakov? His daughter gets kidnapped. It's a terrible thing that happened. Because if you look in the beginning of next week's parasha, when Yaakov and Esau meet, after 22 years of not seeing each other, 20 years actually, of not seeing each other, it says that all the Yaakov's wives, Rachel, Leah, Rivka, Bilhah, Zilpah came and bowed down. Yaakov's sons, 11 sons, Binyamin wasn't born yet, bowed down. Where's Dinah? How come it doesn't say Dinah bowed down? The Torah goes out of its way to tell us that Dinah was born. It's not like, okay, you could say that, the Torah is only listing the males. No, the Torah tells us Dinah was born. So the Midrash says something very interesting. The Midrash says that Yaakov hid Dinah in a box. He didn't want Esau to discover her, and he had no intention of Dinah marrying Esau. So that explains, but that was a mistake. Because just like we learned that now, that Leah's job was to marry Esau. Leah had the power to bring structure, to bring people to return. Balei tshuva, Dinah inherited that power. So God said, Leah, you don't want to marry Esau? No problem. Dinah will marry Esau. And she'll be able to harness and bring structure to Esau. Yaakov says no. God says, okay, that's the case. It's going to take a lot longer than really what it's supposed to. So over here we have over here the tzaddik, and we have over here the rasha. Two various different life paths. The tzaddik, as you see in the picture, tranquil, perfection, everything's easy. The Baal Tshuva, it's churning waters. Why is that? Because the tzaddik only knows of spiritual reality. To him, he's not enticed by chocolate cake, and he's not enticed by bagels, lox, and cream cheese. He doesn't struggle with that kind of stuff. The Baal Tshuva is dealing with the physical world, and he has to fight and overturn that desire and try to channel his energy, that instead of using it for material and lust and pleasures, I'm going to channel that energy towards spiritual service. That's a whole different thing. So if you go back to last week's class, when the Torah calls Esav a man of the field and a cunning hunter, that is talking about Esav's positive qualities. To go down into the physical world and to harness that energy in the physical world and to navigate the dangers of the physical world and to use it and to transform it. Esav is the power of transformation, to transform the mundane world, the physical world, in the service of Hashem. So now we understand, now we can well understand that Yaakov's first love, Yaakov's first love is, do we have over here? All right. That Yaakov's first love is towards Rachel. Remember last week we spoke about the stolen blessings and what happened. Yitzchak really wanted a parallel universe where Yaakov would do the spiritual work and Esav would do the physical work, the material work, and comes Rivka and says, Rivka says no, that Esav can't do it on his own. Rivka understands that Esav would be corrupted by the power, and Esav needs Yaakov. Esav needs Yaakov to help him harness it in. So that's why Yaakov needed to go into deception. Because if you remember, the deception that Yaakov does is in order to be able, because remember, Yaakov is a tzaddik. He's spiritual. Yaakov, if you can't relate to the world, you can't perfect it, you can't transform it. And because evil and unholiness was brought into the world by deception, by the snake, which we discussed in class number 1, Yaakov had to utilize the tools of descent, the tools of deceivery, in order to master both the spiritual world and in order to master the physical world. But even after that, Yaakov is still reticent to indulge his life's mission. He doesn't want. He wants to marry Rachel, and he keeps kind of retreating back to where he naturally is comfortable, to that feeling of the avodah of the service of a tzaddik. So what happens is, in order for Yaakov to do his mission, Yaakov's desire is the spiritual world. His mission is to master both. So he has to be tricked. He has to be tricked in order for him to do his job. In order to make Baalei Tshuva, in order to transform the world, he doesn't have it within him. He's got to marry Leah, and Leah is the one that's introducing that's bringing that element into his life. In order for him to do his work, he had to be deceived himself. Any questions? Yay, nay? Good?
No question.
Okay. Now that we understood that, now we understand it's not just the thievery, and it's not the world's best soap opera and out of control, and you stole my man, and no. Now we can understand our second general base question tonight, which was, how can Yosef act the way he did, taking revenge? And we already spoke about that. We know it's not revenge, because based on the end of the way Yosef treats his brothers. So why did Yosef test his brothers? But now we understand that Leah is the Leah and her children. The path of Leah and her children are the Bali Tshuva, the people of transformation. And the path of Yaakov, Rachel, and her children, Yosef and Binyamin, are the path of the righteous. Everything becomes clear. Let's look at text number 14. Maimonides says, how do you know when someone does full teshuvah, is repented fully, when he has the opportunity to engage in the same act, and yet he restrains himself? And instead, for example, a person who is engaged in forbidden relations with a woman and is subsequently alone with her, and his love for her is just as strong, and his physical prowess is not diminished, and he has the same surroundings as when he sinned, yet he refrains from transgressing that. That is the show. So let's go back to the story. Let's return. I don't have a clock. How are we doing with time? What time is it, Michael J?
8:36.
Okay, we're still doing good with time. Okay, because my watch broke. So let's go back. The brothers, remember, either the self-defense theory or the rulership theory. They thought that Yaakov was trying to get rid of them, right? And therefore, they thought they had to get rid of Yosef because they belong. So they sell Yosef down into slavery. And we know Yaakov told them straight out, I prefer Binyamin to you. Because you can go down to Egypt, but there's no way Binyamin goes down to Egypt. It's only after there's no food and Yehuda guarantees that he's going to bring Binyamin back alive. Yaakov very, very, very unwillingly sends Binyamin down. And now they're faced with a very similar situation. And they don't have to do anything. Yosef is saying, Binyamin stole my cup. And because he stole my cup, I'm going to keep him here as a slave. And back then, you went to the country and you were lost for good. So the brothers could have said, perfect. Now Yaakov can't play any more favoritism. What happened was, Yaakov mourned for Yosef for 22 years, it says. He couldn't get over the death of Yosef. And what did he do? He transferred that love and that favoritism that he had for Rachel and Yosef, and he put it on Binyamin. So now the brothers could have easily said, all right, now we're done with the whole lineage, the whole tree of Rachel. Rachel's gone, Yosef is gone, Binyamin is now going to be gone, and boom. And now Yaakov has no choice but to come to terms with the reality that we are his legacy. And they had a very easy opportunity. Yosef handed them the opportunity on the silver platter. But what happens? The brothers say no. Yehuda goes to Yosef and says, we are not leaving here without my brother. And if it means a fight to the death, so be it. Yehuda makes it clear to Yosef in no uncertain terms that we are not leaving this palace without my brother. Without my brother Yosef. To Yosef, what does that mean? To Yosef understands now that the brothers finally realize that it's not a zero-sum game. It's not that Yaakov is going to choose either Yosef, the son of the children of Rachel, or the children of Leah. Yosef now sees that the brothers have come to comprehend that they all the sons of Jacob, all have a role to play in the service of Hashem. The role of tzaddik and the role of Baal Tshuva. And therefore, they are unwilling to let go of one. Because when you realize that another Jew, another person, has the most integral part in your own life mission, that means you can't do your service of God because the other person is missing, then you're going to stand up. Which, by the way, is the key to all the Chabad houses around the world. The Rebbe is telling us that until every Jew is connected to his heritage, there cannot be a completion in your own service of God. And so this is why Yosef goes from speaking rather harshly to speaking very soft, because he wasn't trying to take revenge. He wasn't trying to make him sweat. And what he really wanted to see is, have they realized the truth? So let's go over so far what we know. The children of oops, I forgot here he said the brothers the first time sold Joseph, the second time defended Benjamin. Okay. The children of Rachel represent the level of tzaddik, the level of perfection. The children of Leah represent the service of tzaddikim, meaning taking the transforming the world. In Hasidic terms, there's a relationship of God down. It's called milmayla lamata, from above to below, and then there's a relationship of up, down, up. That means a tzaddik is trying to sort of leave the confines of the physical world. He's trying to reconnect to its source. The Baal Tshuva, is trying to bring God to bring God down. So he's trying to understand God in the physical world. So we see that these two differences between Yaakov, between the sons of Rachel and the sons of Leah, are played out, as you see in the figure on page 121. This all goes back. Yaakov is the level of tikkun, orderliness. Everything's easy, right? That's tikkun. Where are we? Right. So in the primordial origin, Yaakov is tikkun and Esav is tayu. So the same thing is the sons of Rachel are tikkun, or order, tzaddik, pleasant, order, and the sons of Leah represent the teshuva, taking the world, the chaos of the world, and making it better. And the personalities, we have Yaakov, Rachel, and Yosef are order. They are tzaddik, and then we have Yaakov after getting the blessings, and then Leah and Yehuda. Now, interestingly, in the Torah we find two different divine dwellings. We have the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and we have the divine temple. We have the holy temple in Jerusalem. The tabernacle is represented by Yosef, and the temple is represented by Yehuda. We'll explain that more. And then we have in Judaism. In Judaism, learning Torah, which is the level of trying to understand God's wisdom, is a level of tzaddik, and mitzvah is bringing godliness down. Over here is the level of Baal Tshuva, the level of Leah's children. Activity is again learning and action, and the objective difference between the children of Rachel and Leah is the tzaddik wants to perfect himself, and the Baal Tshuva wants to transform the world. And these are always in a constant tension between the two. It's not one or the other. Sometimes we might feel, we feel that we have to put a stress on one more than the other. But in reality, you have to join forces, and each one wants to be dominant. And so we have the same thing. Yehuda and Yosef are battling for dominion. What's it really talking about? What's the proper way in the service of God? And that's why sometimes we have Yosef as the king, as we see who was the king in Egypt? Yosef. Who brought the Jewish people into the land of Israel? Yeshua, who comes from the tribe of Yosef. Where was the first temple, so to speak? The tabernacle was in the city of Shiloh, which was in Yosef's land. But and then also when Shaul was the first king, also from Yosef, the tribe of Rachel, the tribe of Benjamin. And the Jewish people are very hesitant to accept Shaul as their king. And later it's transferred to Yehuda, King David, and King David builds the temple. And then later, after only a few generations, there's a split in the kingdom. And Yeravam ben Nevat, who comes from the tribe of Menashe, who's from Yosef, has the 10th tribe, the northern kingdom, and there's a southern kingdom, and only way later is the kingdom of David reunited. We see constantly there's a back and forth, because this friction, this back and forth, this tug of war between what we said before, what should be the dominant role, the dominant feature in serving God, is constantly at play. And you see it here in the divine dwellings, the figure 4.2 on page 122. Yosef, I skipped the slide. I'll go do this quickly. Yosef, Yeshua, I forgot about the slide. It's here we are. So Yosef, Yeshua brought them into the land of Israel, Shaul the first king, then Yeravam ben Nevat, and then also it says that even Mashiach was going to be Mashiach ben Yosef, and only later Mashiach ben David, Mashiach the son of Yehuda, and this is reflected in the divine dwellings, because if you see in the figure 4.2 on page 122, the Mishkan, which was built in the land of Yosef, the bottom was dirt, and then it elevated. It went to wood, and then on the roof was skin of an animal, representing trying to take the world and make it spiritual. The holy temple, the top of it had some wood poles, but it was old stone, trying to bring godliness down here into the most physical realms. You know, after all of this, the whole saga of Yaakov and his wives, and we know that Yaakov, we said before, Yaakov clearly loved Rachel more. Who is Yaakov buried next to? Leah, not Rachel. Rachel is buried on a road, on a path, because as we're going to see, very, very powerful text. It says, I'll preface it and we'll read it in a moment, that Rachel and Yosef is the path, but David, Yehuda, is the destination. You can't have the destination without the path. And that's why Rachel is buried on the road, but Leah is buried in the cave. Look in text number 15, page 123. Yosef is only the preface. Accordingly, here you go. It says, accordingly, Mashiach, the son of Joseph, precedes Mashiach, the son of David, preparing the way for the son of David to come and complete the redemption. But Yosef does not complete the redemption. Similarly, although according to Kabbalah, Rachel represents the attribute of Malchus, but yet, nevertheless, she's buried alongside on the road. She does not complete the process. Leah completes the process, because the truth of the matter is, what does God want from us? To run away from the physical world? To elope on Mount Moriah? To elope on Mount Sinai? That's not what God wants. God wants to come down from the mountain. Hashem wants us to work with the material world and transform the physical world into a dwelling place for godliness. And that is represented by the element of Leah, to return the physical world to what it's supposed to be. And that's reflected in a famous debate. You see in text number 16, the rabbis had a debate. What's better? Learning or action? Rab Tarfon said, action's greater. Rabbi Akiva said, learning better. What did they conclude? Learning is greater. Why? Because learning leads to action. So the question for discussion, did the Talmud solve anything? or did it just make it more complicated? No? Guys, come on. You guys got to chime in over here. No. Did the Gemara solve anything?
It sounds like which came first, the chicken or the egg? In this case,
Exactly.
the learning came first.
Right. So if you want to say if the entire greatness of learning is that it brings to action, just say action's greater. Why you gotta make things so complicated? Jackie Mason once said, "I have enough money to last me for the rest of my life, as long as I don't spend anything." Thank you. Thank you very much. And the answer, by the way, it seems like, like in Fiddler on the Roof, you're right and you're right. Okay, you're both right. What? But in reality, that's not what's going on. Ultimately, the goal here is action. But the only way to get to action is through learning. Remember, if you go back to figure 4.1 on page 121, what's under the column of Yosef? Learning. What's under the column of Yehuda? Action. So in order to get to the destination, in order to get to the cave, in order to bring it to the house, you got to have learning. But the main thing is action. So again, stressing again this point, the Yosef is not the goal. Yosef is the path. You can't get to the goal without the path. So now, let's bring it to 2020. What should be the mission statement for Judaism? If I were to ask you, imagine I asked you, question for discussion on page 125. If I were to ask you, compose a mission statement for Judaism, what would you say? Everybody, please chime in over here. You're not going to get punished, and I promise I won't make fun of you. Okay, okay, don't believe me. No, I'm kidding. I won't make funny. Participate, everybody. No, what's the mission statement for Judaism? Why did God give us a Torah?
For Tikkun Olam, I think.
That's a good one. Tikkun Olam. Thank you, Esther. Anyone else? Anyone else?
It's a guide for us to how to live our lives and help other Jews.
That's good. Okay, so that's very good. So usually, based on the answers of Ira and Esther, usually get one of these two answers. Judaism is about spirituality or religious objectives. They include prayer, learning Torah, doing mitzvahs. Why? In order for us to weed out the negative character traits, like selfishness and anger, laziness and greed, in order that we can perfect ourselves and have a harmonious home environment and have a beautiful community. And how do we accomplish that? We accomplish that through the lessons, the guide that Ira said, the Torah says. So learning, you learn Torah, you become a mensch. And then you have the other side, like Esther said, the concept of Tikkun Olam, of making the world a better place. And people will say that Judaism is about fighting for justice, overcoming ignorance, and fighting poverty and illness, working toward world peace, and all these other universal goals. And so most people, many times, all they'll do is they'll say it's either this or that. And they'll say, Rabbi, how could me putting on tefillin, or how can I lighting Shabbos candles, how does that lead to the better world? Because the crux of the lesson of tonight's class is we should not look at the world in either or. That's the mistake that Yosef and his brothers made. That's the mistake Yaakov made. The idea is that they're all supposed to work together. that Yosef is the path, but Yehuda is the goal. Or simply stated, you can't fix the world without fixing yourself. So the lesson over here is we all have to learn Torah. Yosef is the path, but Yehuda is the goal. I hope you enjoyed it. Here's the key points.
Lesson 4. Joseph and his brothers. 1. The story of Joseph and his brothers presents us with two baffling mysteries. A. What led the children of Jacob, who were righteous and holy men, to act in such a way, plotting to kill their own brother and then selling him into slavery? B. Since it's obvious from the narrative that Joseph bore no ill will toward his brothers, what was the purpose of the trials and tribulations to which he subjected them? 2. Both questions are resolved when we understand the deeper roots of the conflict between Joseph and his brothers, a division that runs as a seam throughout Jewish history and exists as a dichotomy within our own lives. 3. There are a number of striking parallels between A. Jacob's deception of Isaac to receive the blessings intended for Esau, B. Jacob being tricked into marrying Leah instead of Rachel, and C. The brothers' selling of Joseph into slavery and misleading their father Jacob into believing that Joseph was killed by a wild animal. Indeed, these three events are interconnected. 4. Although Leah was Jacob's first wife and the mother of the majority of his children, Jacob regarded Rachel as his primary wife, and Rachel's children as his true progeny, something that the children of Leah refused to accept. This created the divide between the children of Leah and the children of Rachel within the formative family of the people of Israel. 5. On a deeper level, Rachel represents the service of the tzaddik, the development of all that is spiritual and holy in ourselves in the world. Leah represents the service of teshuvah, the mission to engage with the material world in order to transform it and sanctify it. In the original scheme of things, Rachel, the person as well as the lifestyle, was meant to be Jacob's only wife and role, while Leah was destined to marry Esau. However, when Jacob obtained the mastery of the material world by stealing the blessings intended for Esau, he was compelled to marry Leah, as well as to incorporate the service of teshuvah into his life's mission. But his first love remained Rachel and the path of spiritual perfection that Rachel represents. 6. The two paradigms of the children of Rachel and the children of Leah assume various forms. In the earlier periods of Jewish history, the people of Israel were governed by leaders and kings from the tribes of Joseph and Benjamin, i.e., the children of Rachel. Subsequently, however, the leadership of Israel was entrusted to the tribe of Judah, of the children of Leah. The same process is represented in the divine dwellings created by the people of Israel. The portable Mishkan, which was made of organic materials and which stood in the territory of Joseph, represented the service of God through spiritual growth and self-perfection, whereas the Holy Temple, built of stone on its permanent site in the territory of Judah, represented the service of action in the material world. As these examples demonstrate, the Rachel paradigm always precedes and paves the way for the Leah paradigm. 7. The story of the selling of Joseph and the sequence of events leading to Judah risking his life to save Benjamin and to the brothers' reconciliation charts the process by which the children of Leah came to accept the leadership of Joseph. Centuries later, the children of Rachel would be challenged to accept the transition of the nation's leadership to the tribe of Judah. 8. The Talmud presents this dichotomy in the form of a debate. Which is greater, learning or action? The conclusion is that action is the ultimate goal, but one can only reach it through learning. Similarly, the many goals and objectives of Judaism may be described in terms of two general categories. A. Spiritual or religious objectives. B. Improving and perfecting the world. the latter cannot be achieved without the former. In the final analysis, we cannot fix the world without perfecting ourselves.
Okay, so the exercise for the week. Identify something you recently gained in a self-improvement sense, a new idea you learned, a new skill you acquired. Now think of at least one way you can direct this personal gain towards helping others and improving the world. Next week is a very, very good story because, I mean, the story that really needs explanation, because here God appeared to the Jewish people and said, do not serve idols, and they go make a golden calf. And Moshe breaks the tablets. That story really needs explanation. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions. We'll send out the video. Have a great week. All the best.
Rabbi, just one comment, Rabbi.
Go ahead.
Learning is an action.
Okay, that's good. That's true. Learning is an action. Yes. Let me see if my mouse isn't working. Learning is an action, but over here, we're talking about over here. Usually, when we talk about learning, we're talking about we're talking about a person, trying to refine himself. That doesn't mean it doesn't mean necessarily it's not an action. Obviously, it is an action, but we're talking about the difference between self-refinement versus environmental good. That make sense? Yep. All right.
Okay.
Let me know if you guys have any questions.
Where can we find the